I've been using Näak since 2022 in both of my training and racing when I first tested the products and used them during UTMB Chamonix. You've no doubt seen me putting them to use in my films over the years. They sponsored a bunch of my earlier projects, and I've been working with them exclusively as a nutrition sponsor since the beginning of 2025. Now, you've likely also come across Näak products at any UTMB events you might have done, since they've been the official on-course nutrition supplier for the entire race series since 2023. Not bad for a Canadian startup. So in this video, I thought I would run through everything that Näak makes. I'll talk about when to use each product and which ones are my personal favorites and why. Now, nutrition is, of course, a very personal thing, but in case you're curious about giving Näak a try to see if it could work for you too, well, then this video should help you decide on where to start. And you can use my discount code for 15% off of your order from Näak.com. Now, as of 2026, Näak's range is essentially divided into three pillars. Ultra Energy, their core endurance line, designed for longer efforts, the newer Boost Energy line intended for shorter efforts, and Ultra Recovery for recovery, of course. So let's start by talking about the Ultra Energy line. And this includes the drink mixes here, gels, purees, waffles, bars, and a newer soup mix product as well. And this is the line that I rely on the most, and so it's what I have the most experience with, and it's what I happen to have the most of in stock as well. I started using the energy drink mix back in 2022, as I said, while training for UTMB, and I've used it for pretty much all of my longer efforts since then. It's worked particularly well for me during events like the Moab 240 and more recently the Mammoth 200. And what I like the most about the Ultra Energy line and why it's so good for the kinds of longer races that I do is that it has both carbohydrates and protein. And the theory is that protein may help to reduce muscle breakdown during very long efforts, something that becomes especially important at the 100 to 200 mile distance. In a multi-day race, you're no longer just fueling, you're trying to recover as you go, and this is where getting a steady drip of protein becomes really important. Now, the Ultra Energy drink mix was one of Näak's sort of original flagship products, although it was reformulated a couple of years ago so that it would mix up better and for a slightly less sweet taste to help avoid flavor fatigue. So if you haven't tried it in a while, you might want to give it another shot. Each serving contains 250 calories, which is meant to be mixed in a 500 ml soft flask, and that'll give you 55 grams of carbs along with 8 grams of protein, including 1,300 milligrams of BCAAs and 650 milligrams of electrolytes. The protein is a canola protein isolate, replacing the soy and pea proteins that were historically used in the product before that reformulation. So it's still vegetarian, but from my understanding, this is a higher quality plant protein with a fairly complete amino acid profile compared to other plant proteins. And for many athletes, this may be easier to tolerate in the gut during longer efforts than dairy-based proteins. Now, on a daily basis, I aim for the recommended 1.8 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram, which for me is up to 150 grams per day. And getting a steady drip of protein from this drink mix makes it really easy to hit that target and more, even during a 200-mile race. Because for a multi-day race, I personally just don't think relying on carbs is the best strategy. Now, there are a handful of flavors available, but watermelon is definitely my go-to. It's got a fairly subtle taste that I just can't seem to get sick of. Peach apricot is probably my second favorite, so I tend to alternate between the two during longer races. And then lime is really great for warmer temperatures, as is the newer pineapple ginseng flavor developed with Mathieu Blanchard. But during a race like Badwater 135, where I know I'm going to be consuming a lot of fluids, I'll typically alternate between as many flavors as I can to avoid flavor fatigue, including the neutral flavor, which has sort of more of a generic sweetness to it. Now, the rest of the line has a similar ratio of carbs to protein, although this varies a bit depending on the product, as well as the flavor, because in most cases, these are from natural ingredients. In fact, I remember when there was a controversy happening around a certain brand of energy gels, we'll say. Someone tried to point out that the caloric content varied slightly in the purees from Näak as well. And the simple explanation was that the organic apples used in this flavor, for example, the apple and maple syrup, well, the caloric content of the apples themselves can vary within a few percentage points, but still well within acceptable limits. One consequence of using natural ingredients is that nutritional values can vary slightly from batch to batch, but that's a small trade-off, in my opinion, when you're consuming as much as I do of a product throughout a season. Now, these purees in particular are quite a unique product on the market. Years ago, I remember that people would actually run with baby food pouches similar to these that they'd buy from the grocery store. And I've found that these can actually be much easier on the stomach than something like energy gels in a lot of cases. Now, the waffles are what I probably reach to the most though, particularly the berry flavor here. These have 140 calories with 18 grams of carbs and 3 grams of protein. And I find that waffles work really well for me in pretty much all but the warmest conditions, when I prefer to rely more on gels. The gels in this line come in 2 different flavors, my favorite being the salted maple here. Maybe that's the Canadian in me. And these will give you 200 calories with 27 grams of carbs, 2 grams of protein, and 420 milligrams of electrolytes. Now these have sort of a slightly gritty but liquid texture to them, as opposed to the gelatinous type texture from gels from other brands. And they are quite sweet as well. So test them out. You'll either love them or not. Now the bars are my favorite pre-run snack, particularly the peanut butter and chocolate here. It really does taste like eating a chocolate bar. And you can get these bars in both caffeinated and non-caffeinated flavors. And I believe the bars have the highest ratio of protein as well. One bar will give you 200 calories with 27 grams of carbs and 7 grams of protein. So I've eaten these for recovery in a pinch as well after a run. And then you've got the soup mix, which you could put in a bowl at an aid station with hot water, or you could just mix it into your flask. I often get soup broth at aid stations. It's a pretty common aid station food, particularly when my stomach hasn't been feeling great. But unlike regular broth, this will give you 250 calories with 55 grams of carbs, 8 grams of protein. So the same as a serving of the Ultra Energy drink mix, but with 1100 milligrams of electrolytes. So a great way to get a good dose of those minerals that you're going to be losing through your sweat. Now, the name of the game for me is to have options during a race. So I'll typically aim for 1 serving of the Ultra Energy drink mix per hour, and I can just sip on that slowly. So that gives me 250 calories with 55 grams of carbs, and then I can layer in a gel or a waffle or a puree, one of those an hour, which brings me to as much as 400 to 450 calories with over 80 grams of carbs, plus that steady drip of protein. And that's pretty good for a longer effort where I'll then be mixing in some real food from aid stations and from my crew. But for shorter efforts, your goal should be to maximize your carbohydrate intake with minimal protein or fat. And that's where the Boost line now comes in. This includes the Boost drink mix and gels, each containing 60 grams of carbs with 250 milligrams of sodium. These use a 2-to-1 glucose-fructose ratio designed to maximize absorption. Now, I have less experience with this line during races myself, although I do use both the drink mix and gels occasionally for my speed work. And the gels come in a few different flavors, including a new ice mint one that I think is really good. So this line will be much better for a higher carb strategy if that's your goal. Okay, so last but not least, let's talk about recovery. And there are 2 different products here, the original protein powder and the new complete mix, which has both protein and carbohydrates. So starting with the original, there are 2 flavors. One that is chocolate that has soy, pea, and cricket protein. Now, when Näak first launched years ago, I remember tasting their cricket protein bar at an event, and it was definitely unique. And cricket farming is far more sustainable than livestock farming. And sustainability is a big part of Näak's commitment when it comes to everything from sourcing their ingredients to their packaging. If that's not your cup of tea, there is a vanilla flavor as well made with soy and pea protein. 25 grams of protein and completely plant-based. But my favorite product is the new complete mix, which comes in 3 different flavors, each more delicious than the last. Chocolate hazelnut, vanilla chai, and my favorite, mango coconut. Each serving will give you 10 grams of protein along with 40 grams of carbohydrates plus electrolytes. Because you need not just protein, but carbohydrates following a hard workout. You need to replenish those glycogen stores. And again, completely plant-based. As I said, you can get 15% off using my code Jeff15 at Näak.com or with my referral link. I will include that in the description below as well. And let me know in the comments if you've tried Näak products and how they worked for you, and which product and which flavor is your favorite.